Ms. Rosenka, did you want to rebut with your additional time or anything? Do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I just, yes, thank you. Commissioner Pritchett and I were just talking. We did meet with the neighbors, and they were concerned about the buffering. We've been talking with staff regarding the landscape buffer required and what's necessary, and it is only a 25-foot buffer. There's no requirement for a fence. There's no requirement for an extra landscape buffer. We are prepared to offer an additional landscape buffer to mitigate, whether it be bamboo like they did in Vieira, or what would be, acceptable to you all. My client is thinking, 2 layers of trees, but again, you're going to have a minimum of 45-foot distance between the buildings and the houses. If you look at the aerial, many of those houses in Cypress Woods are at their front property lines, right? They have big backyards. So I think it's actually more than that. But it would have to be a landscape buffer, and he's more than willing to do a landscape buffer. There's nothing in the code requires it. I'm not sure how to negotiate it at the podium like we used to do in the old days when other commissioners were here. But we are willing to do landscaping to buffer. I just don't know. I think it would have to be work with staff, and we can put that in the binding development plan, or we can work with staff and come back, whatever you prefer. We are under a contract deadline. We don't want to wait too much longer. But if that is a concern, or if we have a way to put that in there, landscape buffer, to grow to 30 feet over 2 years, something along those lines, like the bamboo will do. I don't remember what the condition was in the banks, the Space Coast Credit Union's binding development plan.
That was 3 stories.
Right.
Yeah, we put in
And it was
That
bamboo.
was 3 stories, and they put in
Actually,
bamboo.
they put in a berm and trees on top of that. So,
That gave them the extra height.
right. So my client is willing to put the buffer in there to buffer them with the landscape buffer. We don't know how to do it, and staff didn't have the time right now to try to figure it out. But again, I do want to repeat, it's multifamily. It's not multifamily, it's single family attached. The drainage has to meet code. Again, this is, according to Res 4, in theory, this could have 39 units if there weren't wetlands on it. And then you would still have those trips. And again, if the buffering is the issue, which we have heard it is, and Commissioner Pritchett's concerned about it, we can add a condition that there will be, opaque landscape buffering to grow to a height of 20 feet within 2 years, if that's acceptable. Staff thinks that's acceptable as well, because I hadn't even mentioned it to them.
I don't think it's acceptable. 20 foot in 2 years.
Okay, please don't speak out. Well, we can have, there's trees that start at 10 or 12 feet. We can start with that, but it takes time for trees to grow. You can't put in a 20-foot tree very easily that will then take and grow. So. Okay, anything else? No, that's all I have. Just ask that you approve. And we can add the landscape buffering to the BDP as a Okay. condition of the rezoning. All right. Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, ma'am. With the stormwater part, my concern too, but the wonderful thing is with that, if anybody builds, they have to contain their own water. So that's a whole nother hurdle to get through later. So that will be taken care of later. And whether they can even build all these and it's able to contain water, that'll be a thing down the road. So that's different. And the traffic problem, we kind of solved it by them agreeing to pave it, but I still have a lot of struggle. I do have a struggle with going to a Res 6 and adding the additional density. I really do. Let me ask you a question. A berm, I didn't even think about that. That's where they build up on the property and put in trees. So that would maybe be interesting if a berm was built and it's opaque. Am I using that word correctly when you can't see through it?
Opaque.
I'm looking at Kim all the time for this. Now, I'm sorry, you're as good with words. I'm bad with English. My husband will tell you that. But if we built a berm up real high and then put in some additional trees, so there is the inability to see from this project to the other, that could be a solution. And everybody's nodding their head that they'd be willing to do this. My concern would be is the neighborhood right behind it. I would like them to just see a natural complete buffer that's not having the abilities, like you said, look in their pools and stuff. So if we can get there, I'm starting to become a happier commissioner here. And, but again, you'll have to get through all those other things, and you guys are trying so hard to work through it. So I think if we did put in this, and again, Ms. Rosanka, if we went ahead and did Tad's language on there too, I actually spent a lot of time with him yesterday trying to get something that would cover that concern. And so do you guys think that would be an adequate thing if we built the berm on those units that have houses abutting them?
I would just caution that, as Kim said, when you plant the stuff, it's not going to be opaque, and it could take a few years. So we want to make sure that we have a very robust planting plan, so that may increase the depth of it, so you can stagger different heights of things
Okay.
and use berms. I mean, you can get there, just want to caution you that,
Okay.
you know, it might be robust requirements.
Do you need some time to work this part of it out, or do you feel like confidently you could help Ms. Rosanka come up with an adequate BDP language there that satisfy this condition?
Yeah, I feel confident we could work something out on the language for that.
Okay,
Commissioners, if you would,
John.
I just want to caution you that you can only go so high with the berm because the drainage still has to work for your site, and you can't push the drainage off into the yards or the backyards of the neighbors. And so there's a limit to how high they can go with that. And so I don't know, how high that is just yet, but that is something we could definitely work with them on. But I don't know if they have the topo for the property yet or a concept of how their drainage plan would work. But there is a limit to how high that berm could be. So it's not like it can be a,
can't do a
20-foot
30-foot
berm and then
berm?
we'll put 20-foot trees on top of it, right? So, and I assume they would not want to be using retaining walls to have a similar effect. That would be, one, very costly, and two, it would introduce all kinds of other issues for maintenance.
Okay, so Ms. Bentley, how would I make a motion to approve this with, and they're agreeable to BDP with this, and she already has one, you're agreeable to make those changes too, ma'am? How would I state this so that they come up with a type of buffering there that completely protects the neighbors behind as they go up 35 feet? How would I?
We're so far off at this point, I think tabling would probably be better.
Okay.
So that you could get specific language from staff, and they would have a chance to actually think about it and look at their site.
Okay,
We have had experience with buffers before. I think that's what Darcy was trying to explain, where people thought they would be installed and they would look a certain way, and we need to make sure that we're very clear how it will look at the beginning versus later, so
Okay.
that we don't have any problems.
Okay.
But we do need specificity so that we don't end up in an argument about what kind of tree where.
okay, so we can just table this to the very next zoning meeting. That should be a lot of time to make sure all the neighbors concerned, and everybody's going to be so happy with this project. And you guys have been working so hard to try to meet all these needs, and I'm very impressed with that. So, Ms. Rosanka, I know you're all the way back there. Are you good if we table till the next zoning meeting? What's the date? October, November?
If it,
November 7th.
if it doesn't work for it, we can always put it on a regular meeting.
We could. You're so smart.
November 7th is the next one. It would have to be a nighttime meeting probably, right? Okay. Would staff have enough time?
Staff, how are you on that? What would be best for you to make sure we do this properly? And
I think that we would just want to make sure that the applicant understands that gives them a 2-week window to turn this around. I don't know if that's adequate time for them to
Yes,
get
sir.
some of the information
Okay.
put together, like as John was concerned about, having some topo for the berm and stuff to ensure that they're not blocking any drainage
Yes.
with that, so.
Okay.
We're not going to have a topo. And he's under a contract deadline. We really need to do it in October if possible. But the thing is, as a condition, if we can't meet the condition, we have to come back and ask for a change. So, I mean, he is willing to do whatever we need to do to put the language in the binding development plan if we can get it
to you all this month. So if we could,
Can we do this? Let's, everybody work, and if we feel like we get to a place earlier than that, but I would like for the neighborhood to make sure I get your phone number so I can contact them so that they're on top of our meeting times too.
okay.
So is that all right? That,
We'll
can
need
we,
to
do we
table-
have to put the day of the
Yeah.
meeting? We do. Ah,
I'm sorry.
so ma'am, what would you like?
Is October 22nd, is that a county
Yeah, it
commission?
would be October 22nd. That's the next board meeting.
Yeah, that would be our preference.
Okay. I make a motion to table this to October 22nd.
I'll second it for discussion, very brief discussion if I may.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Pritchett, second by Commissioner Lober to table to October 22nd?
You mean both items, the land
Yes.
use and the.
Correct.
Yes. Both items, H8 and H9. Go ahead.
Briefly. No, I was going to say, Mr. Denningoff actually thankfully was the bad guy. I was going to have to go there with the drainage, but he beat me to it. The other item I just wanted to make sure that we have addressed, I'm sure it probably would be anyway, is the maintenance of that shrubbery as well, so that it's maintained in perpetuity. So it's not that if it dies 6 months after it's planted, then too bad, so sad to the adjacent property owners.
Agree.
And also, some clarity, I know you said you wanted Dad's language to be in there, but what about the one item Ms. Rosenka brought up about the transportation impact fee credits? About that being an option, since that will come back to us if those are awarded?
Yeah, I think that part's good too. It's
'Cause-
mostly these.
Well, he crossed this out in his
Oh.
version, and she had asked that we put that back in, so at least they have the
Yeah,
opportunity.
I don't mind at all.
Okay, just,
If I can figure out a way to get them the credits, I would love to also.
right. Okay. That's clear with staff? Okay.
If we can pull it off.
All right, Commissioner Smith?
Oops. I just want to caution everybody, the folks up here and the folks out there, having gone through this with Vieira, it takes a while for that vegetation to grow, and I assume that you'll get vegetation that grows very quickly. But still, it's going to take 2 to 3, 4 years for you to get to the point where it's going to create some kind of a vision block, and it won't be 100%, but it does work. Because we had that in Vieira, and we tried to explain it to the folks, and it was still 2 years before they started to see the stuff grow, and they were happy with it. So just a word of caution.
Commissioner Pritchett?
If you guys would please see Marcia, get your names and phone numbers. I would like to keep you connected with this process too.
All right. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no unfinished and old business. No new business. And I don't believe I have any public comments. So move on to board reports. Mr. Abate?
No report?
Ms. Bentley?
Report?
Ms. Pritchett?
Yes, ma'am, a real quick one. We have been dealing with some code enforcement in District 1, and one of them that came up recently is they were past the point of where we could levy any more fees, and because of that, you can't get them to respond at all. So I was wondering, maybe in a future meeting, find out where you guys are, if we'd be willing to maybe start charging some interest when they've maxed out and they're just like, oh, well, you can't do anything else. Maybe this might be something to encourage them to maybe respond to our staff,
Sounds
trying to
good.
get them, y'all interested in it?
Please.
I'd
I'm
be
good
willing
with
to
that.
look at it.
Okay, so maybe we can ask staff if they can start working on some type of change in our code that we're allowed to, I talked to you about this, or charge some type of interest when they're maxed out on fines.
Maybe with some parameters, like on the extreme cases or cases that would be, a detriment to health and safety, and not just like overgrown grass, like somebody who has
Yeah.
infestation or somebody who has,
Some of these are so bad, and
I
and
know.
they won't respond and do anything because
we're
they're
dealing
maxed
with
out.
a
and-
house with rats right now. It's
Ooh.
unbelievable.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lober?
All right, I'm going to keep it relatively brief, but I can't pass on this board report. I think I passed on the last several. I'm in the process of working with utilities and, to a lesser extent, natural resources in the county manager's office on some concerns that I have with respect to leaking laterals. I may have mentioned it in the past, but I'm in a better position in terms of having things a little bit better formulated. I'm looking at essentially moving from the carrot to the stick with the folks that have not fixed their leaking laterals. Just by way of background, and I'll go into this in more detail probably in a couple meetings when this ends up on the agenda. We spent a tremendous amount of money to test a lot of the beachside communities to see if the laterals were leaking. The laterals are not the county responsibility, but we did it because leaking laterals impact our system. When we have a discharge event, kind of the Cliff Notes version of why we have discharge events oftentimes is because when you have an option of either flooding people's houses and having effluent go back into the toilets, back into the showers, back into the tubs, or releasing it and having it go out to the lagoon, it's a horrible decision, but generally the decision is to release it out into the open so it doesn't go into people's living areas. The reason that often happens isn't just because we have a storm, it's because we have a storm and there's infiltration of water into our system somewhere. Some of that's going to be on account of manholes, some of that's going to be on account of leaking laterals. There are a variety of reasons that we have that infiltration into our system. One of them is the laterals. We have in the past, when we've tested and done the smoke testing to identify those laterals, not only did we advise these folks timely, hey, your lateral's leaking, you're hurting our system, it's not just bad for you, it's bad for us. We went ahead and we offered them through Sorrel funds 100% reimbursement to have a plumber or licensed plumber of their choice, which is good for them because they can use whoever they ordinarily use, and good for us because if they screw something up, pardon the language, the liability's on them, not on us. We didn't force any particular individual or entity on them. We've offered to reimburse them 100% of their costs to go ahead and do that. And yet we had over a long period of time a tremendous amount of reluctance, and I don't know if people are simply uncaring or if they're lazy or what the situation may be, but we've tried the carrot by saying, look, we don't owe you this, but we've gone ahead, tested this portion of the system. We found that yours is failing. It's causing us problems, really what it causes, you can look at it two ways. If we have a teeny little discharge, that discharge could have been prevented by having those laterals fixed. It's whatever that volume is. If you subtract that from the discharge amount, I mean, that's really where you're at. So if we leaked 10,000 gallons and we have 10,000 gallons going in through laterals, that's a problem. If, on the other hand, we have a 1 million gallon leak, something catastrophic, it would have been 10,000 less than that. So some leaks, I think, that we can prevent altogether. Some discharges, on the other hand, I think can at least be lessened. So we really need to look, and I'm not saying that we just basically bludgeon these folks into compliance. We may still want to have that carrot available to say, hey, look, we're still willing to give you this money in order to get you to do the right thing, but if you don't, we're going to be pretty onerous in terms of the fine that we're going to expect you to pay, whether it's $100 a day or something else. They're obviously not getting it, and my level of empathy for folks that are ruining the system and by extension ruining the environment, it's dwindled. I try to keep track with the numbers to see where folks are at, and there is more compliance over time, but it's not at a rate that I think anyone would think is reasonable. So please kind of keep that in the back of your minds. I am going to have something coming up in the near future. I'm kind of at the point where there's no excuse that I've heard that would justify people's reluctance to do something that costs them nothing when we're willing to fix their failed equipment.
How about you just give them a time limit, say that we notified you on X date, you've got 30 days to comply, after which there will be
I'm fine with that.
There will be a $50 a day or $100 a day
Yeah,
fine.
I'm
And
fine
then
with that.
still offer them the
Well,
opportunity
absolutely.
for the
Tell them you have
assistance.
30 days left
And
to take
other-
advantage of the free.
Yeah, otherwise code enforcement action is pending,
Yeah, I don't, I'm not going to say to someone, okay, your lateral's leaking, we're going to start fining you in about 3 hours. No, I'm not trying to be a jerk or unreasonable about it. So yeah, if we give them a month is fine. If that's reasonable with you, if you want to say 6 weeks, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't care so much about that. I'm flexible.
They may at least make an appointment to find someone that'll fix it for them.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It does make sense, because when you look at the big picture, aside from the fact, of course, that it's polluting the lagoon, you're not only dealing with that, but now you're dealing with the taxing on the system, like you said, potential discharges, and oh, by the way, if we have to upgrade that plant, we're talking about a higher cost for everybody. So it's all bad. So I agree. I think that we definitely need to address that. So thanks for bringing that forward.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Tobias.
No report, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I'll be brief. It's October. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'm wearing my pink shirt today, and I have pink socks. I won't show you those. But, so part of that is all about raising funds to defeat breast cancer and create more scientific studies on breast cancer. So I hope my fellow commissioners will help me raise funds and staff as well. It's very easy, and I realize there's an awful lot of things that you can donate to, so if you don't have room on your budget to do that, I understand, but it would be most helpful if we all did that together. And it's easy to do. You can just go to my Facebook, and you'll see Real Men. Just tap on Real Men, and a donate little button will come up, and you can donate $1 or $10 or $500, and I will match anybody's donation up to $2,500. So I'm looking forward to you guys getting involved.
Would you rather we cut you a check or do it online? Because
It's
I give you
fine.
a check tonight, whatever you
Sure,
want.
that's fine. That works too.
Can we
Okay.
share that link on our Facebook?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll share it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
That's all I got.
All right, and I don't have anything myself, so with that, I'll call this meeting adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.